The station had been built to intimidate. Everything about it suggested authority through excess. Ceilings so high they needed their own weather regulation, walls plated in ceremonial alloys whose only function was to be rare, and a central chamber large enough to make even confident species feel politely insignificant. This was where disputes came to shout themselves hoarse and where history was occasionally rewritten between refreshments. The humans arrived late, not dramatically late, not provocatively late, just late enough to apologize 3 separate times while walking, once for the delay, once for interrupting, and once because the translation software had briefly rendered the word hello as a minor insult in 6 languages. They laughed about that last part. No one else did. Across the chamber, representatives of louder civilizations were already mid-performance. One species flared its throat membranes to twice their resting size. Another had dimmed the lights around its seating area to better emphasize the glow of its eyes. A third was reciting a lineage of victories that took so long the station's ambient AI politely suggested a summary. The suggestion was ignored. The human delegation sat down, arranged their data slates, and waited. They waded through accusations that involved metaphors about predatory suns. They waded through threats phrased as poetry. They waded through an impromptu demonstration involving a small explosion that singed exactly nothing of value. When addressed directly, they responded with questions so calm they sounded bored. When insulted, they smiled with the peculiar human expression that suggested amusement rather than pleasure. The alien woman observed from the upper tier, assigned as a neutral cultural auditor. Her people valued pattern recognition above all else, and she had already noticed something off. Humans did not behave like a species negotiating under pressure. They behaved like someone stuck in a long queue that was moving badly but might, eventually, improve. At one point, a delegate slammed a limb onto the table hard enough to crack the surface. The chamber went silent, the way it always did when someone wanted silence to feel like fear. A human leaned toward their translator and murmured something. The translator hesitated, recalibrated, and finally projected, "We understand that you are upset. We are also slightly hungry." There was confusion. Then, inexplicably, laughter from the humans themselves. One of them added that they had been promised sandwiches and that conflict resolution was statistically harder on an empty stomach. This was not a tactic found in any known doctrine. The alien woman recorded a note. Humans employ humor as pressure release. Unclear if intentional. Negotiations resumed. Aggression escalated. Humans continued to absorb it like furniture absorbs noise, present, affected, but unchanged in purpose. They suggested compromises so generous they bordered on self-sabotage. They acknowledged historical grievances they had not caused. They apologized again, this time because their offer might be perceived as insulting in its practicality. Hours passed. Somewhere between the third ceremonial threat and the fourth refusal to accept a perfectly reasonable solution, something shifted, not visibly, not dramatically. The humans did not raise their voices or stand. They simply stopped joking as much. The alien woman noticed because she had been counting. A delegate leaned forward, pleased with their own momentum, and announced that patience had ended. That consequences would follow. That humanity would soon learn what escalation truly meant. One of the humans nodded thoughtfully and replied, "That's fair. Just so you know, we've been patient for a while now." Another human glanced at the time and sighed, not angrily, just tiredly. "Okay," they said, more to themselves than anyone else. "I think I'm actually getting annoyed." Nothing happened. No alarms, no weapons. No dramatic lighting changes. And yet the room felt smaller. The alien woman's pupils fractured slightly as her perception sharpened. She realized, with a clarity that made her uncomfortable, that this was the first truly honest statement the humans had made all day. Everything before it had been restraint disguised as politeness, adaptation masquerading as weakness. humor functioning as insulation. Around the chamber, species who had survived long enough to recognize danger began, very quietly, to reassess their posture. The humans remained seated, calm, attentive, annoyed. The first recorded misunderstanding happened because humans laughed. The archive labeled it a border compliance incident, but everyone who had been there remembered it as the moment the room lost control of the situation. A patrol vessel belonging to a meticulously aggressive civilization had intercepted a human cargo convoy and initiated what their doctrine called dominant first contact. The doctrine required a show of force, a declaration of superiority, and a countdown that was meant to induce panic somewhere around the number 6. The humans listened patiently through all of it. They asked if the transmission quality could be improved, because one of the syllables kept dropping out, and that made the threat sound unfinished. They requested clarification on which border had been crossed, since the map they were using had been updated last week and might not match local editions. One of them, possibly out of habit, thanked the patrol commander for their time. The commander interpreted this as mockery. It was not mockery, it was a human default setting. From a nearby observation platform, the alien woman watched the exchange unfold in real time. Her skin shifted faintly toward a cooler hue as she focused, a trait her species had long ago stopped trying to hide. She looked human enough to unsettle diplomats, 2 eyes, familiar proportions, but the resemblance broke under sustained attention. Her pupils divided subtly when processing complex input, and right now they were very busy. The patrol commander escalated. Voices rose, weapons charged. The countdown restarted at a louder volume, as if volume itself were persuasive. A human muttered something off-channel. Another replied, "No, don't say that, it'll sound sarcastic." A third sighed and asked if anyone else thought the countdown voice sounded tired. The convoy did not alter course. Instead, the humans initiated a negotiation subroutine so thorough it bordered on performance art. They offered trade. They offered data. They offered to send over a tutorial on updated border mapping software, complete with color coding. They made a joke about how borders were like furniture arrangements. Everyone was convinced theirs made the most sense. The alien woman recorded another note. Humans joke when stakes increase. Possible stress adaptation. Possibly contagious. The patrol commander, now furious, declared that restraint had limits. That patience was weakness. That humans had misjudged the situation. A human nodded sympathetically. "That happens," they said. "We misjudge things all the time. Last month we tried to microwave metal again." There was a pause while translation systems worked very hard. Nothing exploded. No ships were destroyed. Eventually, the patrol disengaged, confused rather than victorious. The incident ended with paperwork so dense it achieved a minor gravitational pull. Across the galaxy, similar encounters accumulated. Humans endured tariffs that made no economic sense, insults encoded into legal language, and ritualized intimidation that required special lighting permits. They responded with tolerance that looked suspiciously like indifference. They adapted routes, adjusted technologies, and learned enough about local customs to offend people accidentally rather than intentionally. They joked through it all. In one archive clip, a human diplomat listens to a 30-minute declaration of impending doom and replies, "Okay, but just to confirm, is this doom before or after lunch?" The alien woman reviewed thousands of these records. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Humans did not escalate. They absorbed. They joked. They waited. And when waiting stopped being viable, something else took its place, something efficient and deeply untheatrical. What unsettled her most was the absence of anger. When humans acted, it was not with fury but with a kind of tired resolve, as if correcting an error they had already warned everyone about. In one infamous case, a blockade designed to starve a human colony collapsed overnight, not through violence but through contracts. Supply chains rerouted. Dependencies exposed. The aggressors woke to find their own infrastructure politely owned by subsidiaries they had signed away during negotiations they thought meaningless. A human spokesperson later described the event as unfortunate but necessary and apologized for the inconvenience. The alien woman paused the footage and leaned back. Her skin shifted again, reflecting something close to amusement and something much closer to unease. She realized then that humanity's most dangerous trait was not strength, or ingenuity, or even stubbornness. It was restraint paired with humor, because humor meant they were still choosing not to act. And the galaxy, loud and proud and very fond of threats, had not yet learned what it sounded like when humans stopped laughing. By the time the third warning was issued, everyone involved already knew it was ceremonial. Ceremonial warnings were a galactic tradition. They existed to make records look fair and to give historians something to argue about later. This one arrived exactly on schedule, delivered in a voice engineered to sound grave across 17 auditory ranges. It explained, very carefully, that human tolerance had been exhausted by continued interference, that consequences were now unavoidable, and that responsibility would be assigned accordingly. The humans listened. One of them adjusted their seating position and asked, politely, whether the warning came with a receipt or if they were meant to keep track of it themselves. Another suggested forwarding it to a shared inbox so it wouldn't get lost. Someone else wondered aloud whether unavoidable consequences had an expiration date. The alien woman watched from the periphery of the data chamber, her attention split across live feeds and probability projections. Her people did not laugh easily, but she found herself doing so now quietly, reflexively, before realizing what that meant. She stopped. Across multiple systems, the situation had tipped from nuisance to damage. Human installations were no longer merely inconvenienced, they were being targeted with intent. Communications arrays went dark. Civilian transports were delayed until further review. The sort of pressure that was supposed to force a reaction. It did, just not the one expected. A human coordinator cleared their throat. "Okay," they said gently. "We've tried talking. We've tried joking. We even tried being really, really patient, which for us is a limited resource. I think we're actually getting annoyed now." There was no emphasis, no threat, just a statement delivered the way one might mention a change in weather. Something changed anyway. The first system failure was so precise it took several minutes to be noticed. A logistics network stopped responding, not crashing, not burning, simply refusing to authenticate commands it had previously accepted. A fleet commander shouted orders at a screen that responded with updated legal ownership documents. Humans, it turned out, were very good at paperwork. Another failure followed, then another. Weapons platforms powered down for routine maintenance that had been scheduled months ago by predictive algorithms no one had bothered to audit. Trade currencies fluctuated sharply, reacting to data corrections that were technically accurate and devastatingly timed. Someone demanded to know what the humans were doing. A human replied, "Fixing the problem." Another added, "Also, sorry about the inconvenience." The alien woman's pupils fractured as she tracked cascading outcomes. This was not escalation. This was resolution. Fast, clean, and deeply unfair to anyone who believed power had to announce itself loudly. Humor crept back in at the edges. A human remarked that if this worked, they should try it with their own tax systems. Someone else suggested naming the operation something intimidating, then immediately vetoed all the suggestions for being too dramatic. Within hours, the interference ceased, not because it was defeated, but because it was rendered impractical. Entire strategies unraveled once humans stopped absorbing pressure and started redirecting it. No fleets were destroyed. No worlds burned. The aggressors were left staring at empty threat displays and very full inboxes. In the quiet that followed, the alien woman realized she had been holding tension in her posture, mirroring the humans without meaning to. Now they relaxed. Jokes returned. Someone complained about needing coffee. Another apologized again out of habit. The galaxy would argue later about what had happened. Some would call it manipulation. Others would call it inevitability. The alien woman recorded her final note for the cycle. Humans are not dangerous because they are aggressive, she wrote. They are dangerous because they wait. And when they stop waiting, they do not seek permission.